Ethan Caldwell had already reached the glass doors when he heard the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "You're not what we're looking for." He didn't turn back. He couldn't. Because if he did, they would see it. The exhaustion in his eyes. The quiet desperation of a father who had nothing left to prove, and everything left to lose. But what happened just minutes later, on the busy sidewalk outside that building, would make a billionaire CEO run after a man everyone else had just rejected. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen struggles, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. Why humanity still matters. Ethan stepped out into the crisp Chicago air, the door closing softly behind him like a final verdict. The towering building reflected his faint silhouette, creased shirt, worn shoes, and a face that looked older than his 32 years. He adjusted the strap of his bag, the same bag he had carried to every interview for the past 3 months. Inside it were copies of his resume, carefully printed, slightly wrinkled at the corners now, like his hope. Another one, he whispered to himself, forcing a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Across the street, cars rushed past, people moved with purpose, and life carried on like his rejection meant nothing. But to Ethan, it meant everything, because back home, in a small 2-bedroom apartment, his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, was waiting. Waiting with the kind of faith only a child could have. "Did you get the job today, Daddy?" she had asked that morning, her tiny hands holding his face. "I'll try my best," he had replied. And he had. God, he had tried. Inside the building, the interview panel had been polite but distant. 3 executives, 1 HR representative, and a silence that grew heavier with every answer Ethan gave. Their experiences unconventional. One of them had said, unconventional. That was one way to describe it. Ethan had spent years working odd jobs, construction, delivery driving, warehouse shifts, anything that paid enough to keep food on the table after his wife passed away unexpectedly 3 years ago. He hadn't had the luxury of building a perfect resume. He had survival. "And your gap here?" another interviewer asked, pointing at the timeline. Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly, "My daughter was sick. I stayed home to take care of her." There was a brief pause, a glance exchanged between them. No one said it out loud, but he could feel it. Not reliable. Too much baggage. Not corporate material. "Thank you for your time," the HR representative concluded, her voice neutral, practiced. And just like that, it was over. Now, standing outside, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He stared at Sophie's picture on the screen, her bright smile, missing front tooth, eyes full of life. "How do I tell you this one, kiddo?" he murmured. He started walking, each step heavy, his mind already racing with calculations. Rent due in 2 weeks, bills stacking up, groceries running low. He didn't notice the man watching him from the building's top-floor window. Upstairs, Adrian Whitmore, Billionaire CEO of Whitmore Industries, stood with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the small figure walking away below. "Who was that candidate?" he asked sharply. His assistant, Clara Hayes, blinked in surprise. "Ethan Caldwell." "Why?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned away from the window and grabbed his coat. "Cancel my next meeting." Clara frowned. "Sir, you're about to meet." I said cancel it. There was something in his tone, urgent, almost unsettled. Within seconds, Adrian was out the door. Ethan had just reached the corner when he heard footsteps behind him. "Mr. Caldwell." He froze. For a moment, he thought he imagined it. No one ever called him back. He turned slowly. A sharply dressed man, slightly out of breath, was hurrying toward him. Not just any man. The CEO himself. Ethan blinked in disbelief. "Sir?" Adrian stopped in front of him, studying his face with an intensity that made Ethan uneasy. "Why didn't you mention it?" Adrian asked. Ethan frowned. "Mention what?" "That you stayed home to care for your daughter full-time, while working night shifts." Ethan's heart skipped. "How did you?" "I read between the lines," Adrian said. "Something the panel clearly failed to do." Ethan looked down, unsure what to say. "It doesn't matter. I understand why I didn't get the job." Adrian's jaw tightened. "No, you don't." Suffer a moment, the noise of the city faded. Adrian glanced at the people walking past them. then back at Ethan. "Do you know what I saw in that room?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "I saw someone who answered every question honestly, even when it hurt his chances. Even when it hurt his chances. Someone who didn't try to impress us with buzzwords or fake confidence." Adrian paused. "And I saw a father who chose his child over his career." Ethan swallowed hard. "That's not a weakness," Adrian continued quietly. "That's character." Ethan felt something shift inside him. Something fragile, something he had almost lost. "But that's not what companies want," he said softly. Adrian gave a faint, almost bitter smile. "Most companies don't know what they want, for they stood there for a moment, two strangers connected by something neither fully understood." "Walk with me," Adrian said suddenly. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. As they moved along the sidewalk, Adrian spoke again. "When I was 10 years old, my father lost everything," he said. "Our business, our home, everything." Ethan listened quietly. "He worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I barely saw him, but when I did, he was exhausted." Adrian's voice softened. "One night, I told him I wished he'd stay home more. He looked at me and said, 'I'm doing this so you'll have a better life.'" Adrian exhaled slowly. "I didn't understand it then, but I do now." Ethan glanced at him. "You think I made the wrong choice?" Adrian stopped walking. "I think you made the hardest choice." Silence followed, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. "I'm not offering you the position you interviewed for," he said. Ethan's heart sank slightly. "But I am offering you something else." Ethan looked up. "A role that doesn't exist yet," Adrian continued. "One that requires resilience, adaptability, and the kind of integrity you cannot teach." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "You'd be working directly with me," Adrian added. "Flexible hours, higher pay, and one condition." Ethan's voice barely came out. "What condition?" Adrian smiled faintly. "You never stop being the kind of father who would risk everything for his child." Ethan's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for months. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Adrian replied simply. Pratt that evening, Ethan walked through his apartment door, his heart pounding. Sophie ran toward him. "Daddy." He knelt down, hugging her tightly. "So did you get the job?" she asked. Ethan pulled back, smiling through tears. "Something better." Full life didn't magically become perfect overnight. There were still challenges, long days, and moments of doubt. But, for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt seen. Not for what he lacked, but for who he was. And sometimes that made all the difference. Sometimes, before we reach the ending, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt rejected when you knew you gave your best? I read every single comment. Some months later, Ethan stood in Adrian's office, reviewing a project that had just secured a multi-million-dollar deal. "You've done well," Adrian said. Ethan smiled. "I had a good teacher." Adrian shook his head. "No, you had something better." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A reason?" Was it that night as Ethan tucked Sophie into bed? She looked up at him and whispered, "I knew you could do it, Daddy." Ethan kissed her forehead, and for the first time in years he believed it too. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll away, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. And subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters. What truly matters, because sometimes the people the world rejects are exactly the ones who change it.